And what was the timeline? So here we are in June 2025, but when was sort of the ideation, your partnership forged, your business plan developed, and then to now? What was the timeline of that?
India and I met working at the Nomad 10 years ago. We always stayed in touch, and it took some time. I think several years ago we decided we wanted to start looking for a space together. This space came to me, the landlord directly reached out and asked if I wanted to open a 1,500 square foot bar near Madison Square Garden. It was just this room originally. I called India and I was like, hey, do you want to come help me open this high-end sports bar, like think Rocco's in Greenwich Village, while we find our real restaurant space? And she was like, absolutely not. I'm a 2 Michelin star chef right now. I'm running this kitchen. James leaves me alone. I love working here. I'm not leaving to open a sports bar. I was like, okay, that really makes sense. Michael asked me, he's like, I was gonna do this amenity in the back of the lobby, but I don't really like the space. There's no windows. Do you want to add it onto your space and maybe use it as a kitchen? And so that's how we ended up with our kitchen. And still wasn't big enough space. A couple weeks later, he was like, there's another 2,200 square feet in the basement that attaches that I'm not gonna use. Do you want it? And I said, yes. And then I called India immediately. I was like, hey, I think I have a big enough restaurant for us now. And she came and, it took some convincing because when we signed this lease in December of 2023, this neighborhood still does not look like it does now. The street shed was still up in front of Madison Square Garden. Vornado wasn't having private security like they do now. This was a very different, Los Tacos wasn't open, Roberta's wasn't open, and a gelato, all that stuff right here was not open. And so it was a really tough sell. Also probably why we had trouble raising money in the beginning, because everyone's like, this is a disgusting area. And it truly has changed over the past year and a half. So finally was able to convince her to join despite all the shortcomings, and here we are a year and a half later. Having been in this neighborhood on the edges for a lot of my career, at Nomad in 2013, helped Quality Branded open Zuzu's in the Bar Pendry in Chez Zoo, coming right out of COVID in 2021. We took that space and we're looking at this pedestrian plaza between 9th and 10th Avenue on 33rd Street. Watching that neighborhood kind of, Brookfield Place over here, kind of explode. We thought we were gonna do $10 million in revenue our first year. We did 14. And so watching that, when we were standing on this empty corner being like, no one's gonna come eat here, I was able to, walk around this part of 7th and say, it's a better location. It's much closer to everything else. It's easier to get to. We've got the 1 train. And so to see past that is you've got the Nomad Broadway area on one side, and then Brookfield, Manhattan West, but there's nothing here, but it's all the same office tenants. It just seemed like a no-brainer once you look past the street sheds and kind of how derelict it was a year and a half ago. For me, it was just the power of networking and being kind to people and giving advice without expecting anything in return. When we were having trouble getting money in the door and keeping construction going around Christmas time, I had someone from the industry who had become friendly with, who's with a pretty big company, called me out of the blue. He doesn't even live in New York. He goes, hey, I think I have some money to invest in a project in New York. Do you need money? Absolutely. And it's just someone that we had nurtured a friendship over the years just because similar interests like restaurants in the industry, and saved me from having to default and figure out how we're going to pay our construction people. India and I signed a 5-year business development consulting contract with this company. They've been trying to figure out how to compete with Compass, because Compass has Denny Meyer and all these other big cafeteria companies for JP Morgan and Chase and Citi have these smaller restaurateurs working with them now who make it seem cool. They were struggling to compete. It just happened at the same time that I was really desperate for money. And so now we're out pitching for Citibank headquarters, and the idea would be we would help curate menus and bring a little bit of boutique New York City restaurant flair to these otherwise really boring cafeterias. We were about to sign our first deal for a small amenity in Midtown, just kind of test it out. Yeah, the corporate, Midtown Southwest clients is who we're after, so it's beneficial.